Sometimes history changes because someone builds the best machine. Other times, history changes because someone gets told to stop. This is the story of Ford's Calliope 5.8, an engine so revolutionary it could have rewritten motorsport history, but instead became the victim of the most devastating rule change in racing. Picture this. It's 1967, and Ford engineers are locked away in secret development facilities, building what they genuinely believe will be the most advanced racing engine ever created. The Calliope 5.8 wasn't just another engine. It was Ford's ultimate weapon, designed to obliterate the competition and secure their racing dominance for decades to come. This wasn't some half-hearted engineering exercise either. Ford was building a machine that defied every conventional approach to engine design. 3 valves per cylinder when most engines had 2. Twin camshafts stacked in the valley when overhead cams were the rage. No head gaskets, using copper rings instead, and integrated throttle bodies cast directly into the cylinder heads. This wasn't just weird, it was alien technology that looked like it came from another planet.
But here's the cruel irony. While Ford's mad scientists were creating this mechanical masterpiece, bureaucrats were already sharpening their knives. The engine was brilliant, it was powerful, and it was about to be buried before it ever had a chance to prove its worth.
To understand why Ford built this monster, you need to understand the battlefield. The 1960s weren't just about peace, love, and rock music. They were about Ford's total performance campaign, and brother, this wasn't a marketing slogan. This was a full-blown global assault on every form of motorsport. Ford's mission was crystal clear: beat Ferrari, dominate Le Mans, and conquer every racing series on the planet. They'd already tasted victory with their GT40 program, winning Le Mans in 1966 and 1967, but Ford's engineers knew their FE-based 427 engines were reaching their limits. The competition was getting stronger, technology was advancing, and standing still meant falling behind. The Calliope was born from this pressure, the need to build something completely revolutionary that would future-proof Ford's racing dominance. This wasn't about incremental improvements. This was about building a weapon so advanced it would make everything else obsolete. When Ford engineers sat down to design the Calliope, they threw the rulebook out the window. The brief was simple: build something new, not modified. Start from scratch and create the ultimate racing engine, regardless of how unconventional it had to be. This wasn't a parts bin build. There was no bin for this kind of technology. With 630 horsepower confirmed in early dyno testing and Ford claiming potential for 800 horsepower at 8,000 RPM, this engine would have made everything else look like antiques. But it was more than just raw power. The Calliope's advanced breathing, lightweight construction at just 577 pounds, and revolutionary valve arrangement promised reliability and efficiency that would dominate endurance racing for years to come. Let's dive into the technical insanity that made the Calliope so special. The bore and stroke were 4.34 inches by 3.60 inches, giving it 426 cubic inches of displacement, or 427 if you're a die-hard Ford fan who likes round numbers. The bore spacing matched Ford's new 385 series big block, but that's where the similarities ended. The 8 individual throttle bodies weren't bolted to an intake manifold. They were cast integrally with the aluminum cylinder heads, eliminating an entire component and improving airflow dramatically. The fuel injection system was based on Hilborn designs, but adapted specifically for this application. The semi-Hemi pentroof combustion chambers took advantage of the 3-valve arrangement to create incredibly efficient combustion. The 2 intake valves fed the mixture, while the single exhaust valve expelled the spent gases through those massive straight ports, enabled by the horizontal pushrod arrangement. No water pumps were mounted at the front of the engine. Instead, 2 pumps were mounted on the cylinder banks, similar to Ford's old flathead V8. External water lines connected everything, keeping the engine compact and the cooling system efficient. Just as Ford's engineers were putting the finishing touches on their masterpiece, disaster struck from an unexpected source: the bureaucrats. In 1968, the Commission Sportive International, the FIA's rulemaking body, delivered a devastating blow. Maximum displacement for Group 6 prototype cars would be reduced from 7 liters to 3 liters. And just like that, the stroke of a pen had just made Ford's ultimate weapon illegal before it ever turned a lap in anger. Was this about safety, as officials claimed, or was it European bias against American V8 dominance? The timing was suspiciously convenient for European manufacturers who were getting crushed by Ford's big block power. Either way, the result was the same. The Calliope was dead on arrival. Years of development, millions of dollars, and countless hours of the most advanced automotive engineering had been rendered worthless by regulatory politics. But Ford wasn't ready to give up entirely. The Calliope briefly found a home in Ford's CanAm program, powering the G7A Spider chassis. This should have been the engine's redemption story, but it turned into a nightmare. The G7A was grossly overweight at 1,900 pounds, and the Calliope suffered from severe cooling issues and oil contamination problems. Testing was plagued by overheating, oil in the coolant, and reliability nightmares. The engine that was supposed to dominate endurance racing couldn't survive a simple test session. Ford tried different configurations, different cooling systems, and different setups, but the problems persisted, and the G7A never qualified for a single CanAm race. After its brief and disastrous CanAm experience, the Calliope faded into legend. Hot Rod magazine featured it on their June 1968 cover, calling it Ford's secret weapon for Le Mans. Sports Car Graphic wrote about its revolutionary technology. But as the years passed, the engine became more myth than machine. How many engines were actually built? Some sources say 2, others claim 3 or even 5. Who had the remaining engines? Where were the casting molds, the blueprints? As the decades rolled by, the Calliope became drag racing's mechanical Bigfoot. Everyone had heard of it, some claimed to have seen it, but nobody could prove anything. Occasionally, one of the surviving engines would surface at a Ford display or automotive museum, generating excitement and wild speculation about what could have been. But for the most part, the Calliope existed only in the memories of the engineers who built it and the racing fans who dreamed about its potential. Enter Dan Schoeneck, Jay Brown, and the team at FE Power Products, modern-day automotive archaeologists determined to resurrect this mechanical ghost. These weren't casual enthusiasts. They were serious engineers with the skills and resources to attempt the impossible. Schoeneck managed to acquire the original casting cores for the block and cylinder heads from the Henry Ford Museum. Using 3D scanning technology and CAD modeling, they began the painstaking process of reverse engineering the missing components. This wasn't guesswork. They were working from sacred scrolls, rebuilding history from the original blueprints and specifications. The project represents years of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars in development costs. They're not just making replicas, they're creating functional examples of what many consider the most advanced racing engine of the 1960s. Every component has to be recreated from scratch: timing covers, valve covers, camshafts, even the specialized hardware that held it all together. The Ford Calliope. I-8 never won Le Mans. It never dominated CanAm racing. Hell, it never even completed a single competitive lap. But somehow, more than 50 years later, it still matters. It represents the kind of engineering ambition and technical innovation that defined Ford's greatest era. The Calliope proved that American engineers could think outside the box, that conventional wisdom was just a starting point, and that truly revolutionary technology often comes from those willing to ignore the rules. Even though it failed commercially and competitively, its influence can be seen in modern engines decades later. Ford's production modular Phi-8s eventually adopted 3-valve technology. Modern racing engines use integrated throttle bodies and advanced valve arrangements. The dry deck design concepts found their way into high-performance applications. The Calliope was ahead of its time, but time eventually caught up. Sometimes the greatest stories aren't about what happened. They're about what almost did. The Calliope V8 stands as a monument to engineering ambition, regulatory politics, and the cruel realities of motorsport development. It's a reminder that innovation doesn't always guarantee success, and that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are killed not by their flaws, but by forces beyond their control. Today, as Dan Schoeneck and his team work to bring this ghost back to life, we're getting a chance to see what Ford's ultimate weapon could have accomplished. Maybe, just maybe, the Calliope will finally get its moment to sing.